this a little closer to the mic. Hi everyone, welcome to the Dialogues on Aging series, and this themed series, what's the proper theme? Climate change and aging. Or climate health and aging, and we'll have a series of a number of talks on this thematic area. My name is Dr. Julia Henderson. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy at UBC. I'm an investigator with the Edwin S.H. Leong Centre for Healthy Aging and the co-chair of Community Engagement and Intersection. So on behalf of the Center and Providence Health, who has partnered with us on this Dialogue on Aging series, we welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us here today. To begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're gathered here today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded stolen territory of Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. We acknowledge that most of us are here as uninvited guests on this territory. We recognize the importance of Indigenous place thought, which reminds us that this land carries stories and wisdom that span deep time. The teachings of our Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers guide us in understanding our interconnectedness with the land, water, and all living beings. As we work to be ethical stewards of the environment, we honor the Indigenous commitment to protecting the natural world, recognizing that our well-being is intrinsically linked to the health and ecosystems around us. May we move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and respect, acknowledging the profound depths of Indigenous wisdom that continue to shape our collective future and guide our efforts in environmental protection, ensuring a sustainable world for all of us to come. So, you know when you go to the movies and before the feature film you get the trailers? Well, I'm representing a little trailer here today. So I'm going to tell you just briefly about a study of mine where I was principal investigator, and we have a booth at the back that some of you have visited. And after I tell you about that and show a little short video, I'm going to introduce our guest of honor. So this is a study called Intergenerational Arts for Climate Action. And it's a study we did at UBC over the last year and a half. So the inspiration behind it was that previous intergenerational climate-related research has often focused on intergenerational inequality or conflict or differences. And a lot of social discourses around climate change tend to divide generations. Much of climate research also focuses on a single generation, leaving out the intergenerational nature of climate activism and not recognizing similar consciousness and environmental concerns across generations. So researchers Lamb and Trott have called for the use of critical methodologies and related decolonial research practices that emphasize arts-based and participatory methods that facilitate intergenerational solidarities. And so this is really the approach we took in this study. We brought together 10 children aged 9 to 12 and 8 older adults aged 60 plus. And through engagement in a whole range of artistic experiences and practices, we facilitated conversations around climate to understand different perspectives and to try to cultivate intergenerational solidarity. And one of the things we did was collaboratively write a song. We brought in a musician and we did a collaborative climate action song that emphasized their views on climate action, which were really about the importance of working together across generations and also the importance of acting now, not just talking but acting. And so we're going to show you the music video that we shot to go with this song. We just did this in the summer.
We know climate change is a fact. to act. Let's work together, young and old, making choices strong and bold. All right, let's go. Climate change is a fact. Joining forces, we need to act. Let's work together, young and old, making choices strong and bold. One more time. We know climate change is a fact. Joining forces, we need to act. Let's work together, young and old, making choices strong and bold. Making choices strong and bold. Making choices strong and bold.
Thank you so much. And part of that project also was to develop sustainable research practices. So we used all reused and recycled materials and locally made and grown food as well. So we have a booth at the back, and if you're interested in this work or being part of other similar kinds of projects, you can leave us your email. And my research assistant, Kayla, is there as well. Can you give us a wave, Kayla? And they'd be happy to tell you more about the project after as well. Now, it is my great honor to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Tim Takaro. Dr. Takaro is a professor emeritus and physician scientist in the Faculty of Health Sciences at Simon Fraser University. His research focuses on connections between human exposures, disease, and planetary health. With deep respect and gratitude to the First Peoples, he has begun integrating Indigenous knowledge into his work, relearning environmental health through collaboration and testing interventions in climate action and planetary protection. Following the limitations of traditional academic public health approaches, such as education and advocacy, in halting the Trans Mountain Expansion Project, Dr. Takaro took direct action through the Protect the Planet movement. His brave efforts to block construction ultimately led to his incarceration in June of 2022. So now it's my great pleasure, and please join me in welcoming.
Thank you very much for coming. It's a pleasure to be here in this lovely afternoon. I'm just going to apologize that you're inside. But afterwards, I understand you can enjoy the gardens for free because you pay your dues right now. I just want to let you know where I'm coming from. You heard a little bit about my bio there. I was a consultant for the Burnaby residents opposed to Kinder Morgan expansion, and I worked on several reports for them from 2015 to 2018. I began direct action in August of 2020. I was arrested in 2021, and I went to jail in July of 22 for 3 weeks. How close is the front line of climate change? Well, this is the Antarctic ice sheet, the Larsen ice sheet, breaking off in Antarctica, which is raising sea level. This is the Eaton fire destruction in LA earlier this year.
Excuse me, are you trying to get something on the screen behind you?
I certainly am, thank you. That's not happening. That was my disclosure, thank you. And this is the Larsen ice sheet. You can see the big crack. This is the destruction in LA.
That's it, it's really cold.
I think that's going to be best. This is not reliable. How's that for destruction? And this next slide is my university. The lovely Simon Fraser sitting on top of Burnaby Mountain. And you'll notice off to the left there, what do you see?
I see oil tanks.
Oil tanks. What a place to put oil tanks. Or a transport facility for ships right below. Or a pipeline running underneath the mountain. This is also a front line of climate change. What you see here is how the campus is threatened by these oil tanks sitting on the shoulder of the mountain. There's forest surrounding the university. We all know what's happening in forests these days. This is a very dangerous situation, and it's being made worse. But we can do something about it. I seem to be fading in and out on my mic.
Do you want me to switch to that one? If you want.
I could get a, let's see if it goes. No, it's going to fade. So there is something we can do. And part of it is represented in that excellent video. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Part of it is represented by these 10,000 people that marched on Burnaby Mountain in March of 2018. And the next slide. But what it shows, this slide, is that our actions to date have not been enough. Yes. I'm going to switch mics here. And that hopefully will be better. How's that? What you see in this slide is on the red jagged line are the increasing emissions measured in Mauna Loa, Hawaii, since 1960. And you can see that it is an inexorable rise in emissions. The jagged part of the red line is due to the fact that seasonal variation in CO2 means that there will always be a low point in January and a high point in the summer. The colors there are representative of temperatures, and these are temperatures compared to an average temperature in 1970s. So what you see is blue being temperatures below that average, and that starts in 1860, roughly the beginning of the industrial age. And then as we get to around 1990 to 2000, the colors are always higher, with the darker colors being the hottest. We are experiencing inexorable rises in temperature over the past 25 years. Each summer is hotter than the next. In the next slide, you can begin to understand the urgency that we're talking about here. I was involved in a report with Health Canada and many academic researchers called The Health of Canadians in a Changing Climate, Moving Knowledge to Action. What we found was that, not surprisingly, the projected increases in the frequency of severe weather events, droughts, extreme heat, wildfires, will directly be affecting health by causing more illness, injuries, and deaths without greater adaptation. We also found the disruptions to the food systems and water resources, worsening air pollution, the emergence of climate-sensitive infectious diseases, will put increasing demands on the health system and continue to threaten Canadians' health. We also showed that we are at a crossroads. RCP 4.5 refers to a pathway of emissions which are immediately declining. And in fact, by the 2100, we will be needing to pull CO2 from the air in order to keep temperatures down. That's a tolerable temperature increase of about 2 degrees by the end of the century. But the pathway that we're on is called RCP 8.5. The business as usual scenario will have temperatures up to 4 degrees warmer than what we see today by the end of the century. We have a choice to make now. I'm not going to dwell too much on all of these health effects, but you can see it's a kind of complicated picture. What we do know is that the risk of these climate-related illnesses is increasing. And they are driven by things like heat, sea level rise, air pollution, vector-borne disease, water scarcity, and changes in food production. And it makes a difference where you live. It makes a difference how much money you have. It makes a difference how resilient your community is. But we know that these illnesses will increase with increasing temperature, and it will strain the health system. Here is a really dramatic representation of what that looks like. This is a depiction of the 2021 heat wave. And what you see there in the red are excess deaths. Those are deaths above the normal deaths that we see all the time, which would be the green bars. And the red bars represent the excess. You'll notice that those red bars come just a little bit after the peak of the blue line, which is temperature. And that is standard heat wave behavior. About 2 to 3 days into the heat wave, people start dying because that's about all our bodies can handle. We are in the climate emergency now. This is the Kelowna fire of 2023, not to be confused with the Kelowna fire of 2008, or the Kelowna fire that we will see in the next decade. This slide represents our choices. So the black line in the big graph is actual greenhouse gas emissions. The different lines afterwards represent our choices. So what you see in the small graph is the business as usual line, the line we're on now, is that high one that takes us up into 3 degrees. The dotted line represents the promises that we all made as countries in the Paris Agreement in 2015. The red line represents those promises plus additional quote-unquote stretch goals that would keep temperatures just above 1.5 degrees and below the 2 degree threshold, which is a major threshold for biological systems. And then there is this 1.5 degree scenario, the yellow line, which I'm sorry to say does not seem feasible in today's political climate. But we do have a choice to make, and it's ours to make now. So we're making good progress in electrification. We're moving vehicles into electric mode. We're moving our heating into electric modes. And many provinces are not using fossil energy to produce electricity. We're doing okay there. But at the same time, our government is incentivizing fossil energy development. And in fact, is planning to increase emissions from this sector at least through 2030. And if they build all the things they're talking about today, building, it will be extended well past 2030. We know this is wrong. Industry would like us to focus only on individual action. What you can do: ride your bike more, eat less meat, use less energy. And those are all good things to do, but they are not going to get us to our goal. We need both cuts in supply and demand. And the cuts in supply don't seem to be what our government is after right now. So we are not adequately responding to climate change. And then the example that I'm going to give today is now seems like almost ancient history. The pipeline was opened in May, but May of last year. So this is the Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion Project. And it enabled the expansion of the Alberta tar sands. And believe it or not, they're talking about putting in another one, further expanding the tar sands. For this expansion project, the Canadian government authorized the expansion the day after Parliament declared a climate emergency. I was asked by citizens groups to provide input on the health impacts of this project over a decade ago. And I happily did that. I agreed to do it before I learned that the most important health impacts, that being climate change, have been taken off the table by the Harper government. They said, oh, well, this pipeline has nothing to do with climate change. They are living in a fantasy world. But we went ahead with our work. We submitted 2 large reports outlining the need for a cumulative, independent health impacts assessment. A health impacts assessment had been done by the contractor hired by Kinder Morgan. So I'm a member of the BC Health Officers Council. We went to the council with the information and convinced them that indeed the health impacts assessment had been inadequate and that an independent cumulative health impacts assessment was required. A resolution passed. Nothing happened. I was at the end of my rope. So what did I do? I did what any good academic would do. I studied more. Next slide. Oops. What I learned in my studying was that well-planned climate action can lead to opportunities to improve health, equity, and human rights. I also learned that civil disobedience is a public, nonviolent action in breach of the law which aims to change the law or policies of government. And that such action is an act of conscience, and participants accept the possible punishment. These are tenets learned from people throughout history, including Martin Luther King, a man I admire greatly. Climate change impacts are one of the most serious injustices that we see today, because those with the smallest contribution to the problem are the ones facing the greatest threats from the extreme events that we are driving with our emissions. But as Martin said, we must walk on in the days ahead with an audacious faith in the future. And that is what we did. Even the relatively conservative American Medical Association, full disclosure, I am a dual citizen, but I was born in America. And my first medical association was indeed the AMA. They are explicit about possible conflicts that arise in a doctor's duties. And what they say, and I'm quoting here, ethical responsibilities usually exceed legal duties. When physicians believe a law violates ethical values or is unjust, they should work to change the law. Yes. And in exceptional circumstances of unjust laws, ethical responsibilities should supersede legal duties. As a public health physician, I took an oath to protect the health of the people. My training requires me to help people connect the dots between pipelines, future emissions, temperatures rising, death, and destruction for future generations on this beautiful planet. I must do what government refuses to do, stop new fossil energy infrastructure. I will go to jail again if necessary. It is a small thing in the face of enormous challenge, but I can only do what I can do. So, on August 2nd, 2020, I went up in these trees in my neighborhood. It's a 10-minute bike ride from my house down to the lovely Burnett River. And I put up with help of the Tsleil-Waututh and some other good friends, and incidentally the daughter of my dean, this portaledge where I set up a tent, conducted my daily affairs by Zoom. I even did a master's defense from up in the trees. And we did it because we could build and draw people together. We built a coalition with Indigenous allies. We built a coalition with others. Keep you going here. We had many friends. Hundreds of people came to the show. up and to bring food and support. We continued this blockade for 16 months. We had a master treehouse builder amongst us and built this, what we called the Hilton. Unfortunately, we lost that fairly quickly. But we just moved up the stream and put up another. And I'm really proud of this gentleman who you see with his fist raised there. He happens to be in the audience today. Bill, I wonder if you would stand, because this is an amazing effort that Bill put up 7 days in a hammock above the trees, non-stop. That's the kind of people we had out there. We got help from other people. This is my family helping out. We had folks drop this car off in the gate of the Trans Mountain Pipeline facility, and then somehow it lost its wheels. And we had help from the Hummingbird. The Hummingbird stopped the pipeline for 4 months because the migratory birds are protected. We supported other blockades. This is kind of House Manuel and myself in the Tiny House Warrior Blockade. Some of you may have seen this banner that we got up on a large tree on the Tecan. We had fun. We had artists, young artists. We had dinos stopping front-end loaders. And we had amazing artists. Went back. These are the pieces of George Rammel, a fantastic artist. What you see there on the teeter-totter is Justin Trudeau balancing against 3 barrels of Trans Mountain Pipeline, Coastal GasLink, and Bay du Nord. And the little girl there is saying, "Hey, Mr. Prime Minister, that was the tipping point." And that toolbox we delivered to the BC legislature. You may recall that the Premier Horgan had promised to use every tool in the toolbox to stop Trans Mountain. But we think he lost the toolbox. So we brought him one filled with tools such as protect Indigenous rights, protect the salmon, protect people. Eventually, we were arrested, and some of us went to jail. The young lady there on the being carried by the police spent her 80th birthday in jail, and that's me being taken away. They came to get me in this cherry picker, armed to the teeth. These are the community industry response group, militarized police, like I'm some kind of threat. These are the famous Burnett River 6. We all spent time in jail. And those are 2 famous dinos who also went to jail for playing badminton on a work site, dressed as T-Rex. And this is me coming out of the Fraser Regional Correctional Facility. I came out a better man. So what we know, this picture, does anybody recognize it?
It's not a picture.
There is one down in the corner.
The Olympic torch?
What was that?
Is it the Olympic torch?
That's a good one. This, you will become more familiar with this. This is the new LNG plant in Kitimat. This is the flare. This is where today our Prime Minister said, oh, we need to expand this plant. It's one of the 5 listed major projects. So here we are. We know action on climate change is required. Governments in North America are expanding fossil energy when just the opposite is what is needed. We know that if we don't reverse that emissions trend, there will be more death and destruction. Municipalities across the globe, including Vancouver, have declared climate emergencies. Yet in Canada, we remain number 4 in oil production, number 5 in gas, and we are expanding these emissions. This chart, I hope you can appreciate from the left-hand side to the right-hand side goes 1996, 2004, and 2024. These are the new fracking sites in the northeast of the province. This cancer is spreading westward and will increase even more if the LNG Canada facility is expanded, if the Cedar LNG on the Haisla territory goes ahead, and if the Ksing-Lisims LNG on the border with Alaska goes ahead. Living near LNG infrastructure such as fracking and flaring sites leads to higher risk of asthma, heart attacks, preterm birth, certain kinds of cancers, and early mortality, particularly in elderly. So the answer to the question there is yes, we are worried about the health costs of BC LNG. And we all need to be worried about this. We know that the most effective method to reduce anxiety, depression, and sustain hope in the climate crisis is to engage in purposeful action within one's community, both individual and collective. This includes reducing fossil fuel use, making homes more energy efficient, and shifting to more plant-based diets, the individual. But it also includes the recognition that it's fossil fuel industries that are driving the current crisis. They have been doing this since the 70s, when they realized that in fact their industry was destroying the planet. And then they launched decades of disinformation campaigns in order for us to believe that they're going to somehow find a miracle engineering solution and be able to continue producing fossil fuels with impunity. We know that what's driving the increase in emissions now are not individuals, but in fact, these industries. So, here's the solution. How do you take action? Well, for one thing, what we've already covered, it's pretty clear what needs to be done. we need to reduce emissions. What's individual is what you're good at. We all have gifts to bring to this fight. And of course, what keeps you going? What makes you want to get out of bed in the morning? What feeds your soul? And it's where those three things come together that you should find your action. And I'll just note that incarceration is not required. So you're not ready to sit in a tree. There will be opportunities to sit in trees up north. And maybe even down here. It looks like if Premier Smith gets her oil pipeline, it will go on a northern route. But in any event, if you're not ready to sit in a tree, there are other things to do. One is join the legal fights. So we have a homegrown legal action here called Sue Big Oil. And the idea behind this campaign is that oil companies are responsible for trillions, and I'm not exaggerating, trillions of dollars in damages already. They should pay up. Because if the true cost of production and transport and export of oil and gas were calculated in, if all those costs to future generations was calculated in, we would have left fossil energy behind long ago. But we have been subsidizing the industry, pretending like there aren't health costs, pretending like there are not social costs, pretending that the planet is infinite in its ability to provide what is really necessary for our health, which is clean air, clean water, food, shelter, and security. Those are the fundamental building blocks of a health system. So, directing energy to the full costing of fossil energy is a very useful way to go. We have a right to a clean environment according to the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. We should defend that. We should drop banks and other fossil energy funders and move investments to non-fossil energy portfolio. So I'm just going to name them here. Royal Bank of Canada is the number one in fossil energy support, and you should drop RBC and move to perhaps Van City or another portfolio with clean energy. You should get your municipality to join the campaign for the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. Vancouver has done this, New West has done this, Port Moody has done this. Others no. I'm not sure about Coquitlam. Follow the money. So, as I mentioned, RBC is a terrible funder of these projects. Between 2016 and 2023, they funded to the tune of $350 billion US for fossil projects. We should also expose the insurers of these projects. At least 15 dropped Trans Mountain. They can't operate without insurance. We can block new fossil energy infrastructure with our bodies. And then the one I'm just going to finish with, because I want to dwell on it for some time, and hopefully folks will get into this with the discussion with questions, We should realize the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and they are inherently protective of the planet. What do I mean by that? We should consider drawing upon indigenous law. This photo here represents the blockade at the Wet'suwet'en checkpoint over the river in the Yintop. This is where Coastal GasLink was fought for years. We should recognize this indigenous law and the reality that indigenous peoples know something about how to steward land. Remember the history of this region. There was a time when the salmon ran millions and millions up the Fraser River, where the Ulakan was so plentiful you could just dip a net in during the run and pull out hundreds of fish. The Ulakan are gone from the Fraser. Most of the salmon runs are completely depleted. Yet the indigenous folks were here for tens of thousands of years, fishing those same areas and able to fish in a way that maintained the stocks. We have something to learn. We know that where indigenous peoples are stewards of land, that nature declines less rapidly. We know that indigenous participants involved in environmental stewardship programs have healthier lifestyles. And we know that biodiversity in indigenous managed lands is at least as diverse, if not more so, than other protected areas. The Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in BC, the act was passed in November of 2019. It establishes the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as the province's framework for reconciliation. It was one of the demands in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. And enabling legislation is needed now. So, for example, we have a Watershed Stewardship Act and a report that has been finished and not released by this government. It is directly tied to DRIPA. It is a way of enabling our Water Security Act to expand in a way that is consistent with Indigenous stewardship. Why is the government sitting on it? Section 3 in DRIPA says that in consultation and cooperation with Indigenous peoples of British Columbia, the government must take all measures necessary to ensure that the laws of British Columbia are consistent with the Declaration. And each agent of the law can apply it following Indigenous legal principles. If applied, healing occurs. If applied persistently, more healing will occur. There is no failure until one gives up. Don't give up. A few other notes on DRIPA. Indigenous peoples and individuals have the right not to be subjected to forced assimilation or destruction of their culture. States shall provide effective mechanisms for prevention and redress for any action which has the aim or effect of depriving them of their integrity as distinct peoples or their cultural values or ethnic identities. And it requires prevention of and redress for any action which has the aim or effect of dispossessing them of their lands, territories, or resources. So, I'll leave you with this to contemplate. The level of action. On the far left, you have individual action. This is something you can do today. In fact, well, somebody took my paper, but there's tables in the back that will enable you to take action today by sending in a postcard. Very easy, the postcards are there, they will pay the postage. All you have to do is sign it. And there are other things one can do to reduce their own carbon footprint, and some of these are listed here, such as eating less meat and switching to renewable energy sources. The next level is inducing change within the people who you know and love. Your family, encouraging them to change lifestyles, to reduce carbon, organizing events such as this one, to educate people on how they can become active and reduce emissions. Then in the third level is community level, and this involves engaging with local organizations. There are many opportunities at the Seniors for Climate Action table up there. There's a sheet that shows a whole handful of organizations locally that you can become active in. And then finally, there are these high-level policy and economic changes, which are the most impactful because they cover the main source of emissions. And that is advocating for large-scale shifts in the economic policy regulations and moving definitively away from fossil energy. So there's your prescription for action. We all bring different gifts. We're all at a different stage in our ability to act, but we all can act. And you should find your action. Get connected. This is the best part. Because with a community, with people around you, you're going to feel stronger and be stronger. And then finally, show up for your grandchildren. Things are bad now. There are fires every summer. Temperatures are going up every year. Floods will be happening more and more frequently. But it's nothing compared with what our grandchildren face. So show up for your grandchildren. Here's a whole list. I'm happy to get into this in the discussion. I just want to bring out a few high points. September 20th, 2 p.m., Vancouver Public Library. This is organized in part by Seniors for Climate Change, but a coalition of many, many organizations. There will be speakers, music, entertainment, a march down to Science World. So that's September 20th, 2 p.m., Vancouver Public Library. There are many opportunities to join the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment and the Farmers Market. The Kitsilano one is the 21st, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Just drop by the table, talk to people, pick up some materials. Another is the West End Farmers Market on October 18th. And then an online conference that you would be welcome at, also organized by CAPE, the annual Planetary Health Emergency Conference. And this is October 25th, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Happy to get into this in the discussion. We are in a pandemic of denial about the urgency of climate change. I hope that you've caught that bug today. But compounding this is the fact that, as Richard Powers notes in the overstory, we are living at a time when moral authority lies beyond the present day judicial system. This is particularly apparent in my native country, but Canada is not immune. And I found that in my own jail experience. I tend to refer to it now as the Department of Incorrections instead of the Department of Corrections. With that, I'll stop, and I'm hoping to hear from you with questions and points of discussion. Thank you very much. Here's a brave soul.
I super enjoyed your talk. It's very, very, very plus good. Is there a possibility you might be able to give this talk in Parliament?
All I need is an invitation. You can arrange the invitation, I'll be happy to give it.
Are there any other questions? I'll be the microphone runner.
If we have the famous politicians who pass away because of cancer, and they're supposed to be supporting the changes that they haven't done, is there anybody, even if it's from their families or on the deathbed, that they admitted their mistakes, like our former Prime Minister, Premier of BC? It's because it's bizarre that the politicians who are dying of the diseases that I assume they're connected, even at the deathbed, don't admit their mea culpa, etc.
Yeah, it's funny, the mea culpa, I'm most familiar with that because of my work with the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, where the retired generals say, after they have retired, that, oh, this whole nuclear weapons thing was a big mistake. I have not heard of mea culpa from a politician, except, again, a U.S. example, Donald Rumsfeld, but again, in sort of a different context. It will happen because there will be big economic losses, and people will apologize for economic losses. The problem with climate change is it is relatively slow and sporadic in different places. There was terrible fires in Manitoba this summer. Manitoba is sensitized, but people forget very quickly. And it is truly like the frog in the beaker, where you slowly turn up the heat. The frog doesn't even notice it. And eventually it is boiling water. The frog is dead, but it never jumped out. That's kind of where we're at. And it's a failure on the part of the public and the politicians because they are related. And it's true that politicians promise a lot of things that they don't deliver. And we are in an epidemic of greenwashing at the moment. We have provincial government that's saying, oh, gas is good for us. It's going to reduce the coal use and then reduce emissions in Asia. But that is false. We know now that gas is methane, and methane leaks, and it's more potent than CO2. There's roughly equivalency between coal and gas, yet our governments are trying to make it like, oh, we're doing a good thing by producing gas. So I don't know when the mea culpa will come, but it will come. And I would bet the way parties work, it's pretty hard for a politician to ever say, oh, I was wrong, because then you're saying my party was also wrong. And that seems to be unpopular these days.
I'll come through here.
I'm worried about clean water. And the second question is, I thought fracking is not allowed in British Columbia.
I wish that were true. I'm gonna just scroll back to the fracking diagram because I think this is important to understand. So there are two aspects of your question. One is about water, which is absolutely related to this because fracking uses incredible amounts of fresh water, and it makes it unusable ever again because of the chemicals that go into it, because of the fact that once you send it down the hole, it mixes with some very bad water that's already down there, comes back up, and it's unusable. So the freshwater issue is huge. We have this illusion in British Columbia that we've got so much fresh water that we don't have to worry about it. But in fact, there are level 5 droughts. That's the highest level every summer now in this province. Communities run out of water. They have to ship it in. They're talking about building a pipeline now for water in the Peace River because the fracking operations and climate change, isn't that a kind of weird thing? Fracking uses too much water, climate change makes the water go away. What are we doing? And this is what you need to talk to your MLAs about. Because not only do they want to have it look like what we see on the right, they want it to move further west. They want it to be fracked even more. Because we have to supply these new LNG plants. So, yes, we are fracking the heck out of BC. And it's only destined to get worse unless we stop expanding the industry. Nobody is saying that we're going to get off fossil fuel tomorrow. No one is saying that. That's not rational. But it is completely irrational to build new infrastructure that lasts for 40 or 50 years and means that we will frack the rest of the province. That is just selling out future generations, mortgaging their future so that these people, and in this case, now the expansion they're talking about is American billionaires can make a few more billion on our people's shoulders, on our children's future. That is wrong. I would say, as a person who's gone to jail, it's criminal.
Here I come.
I would love
want to take a course in how to engage in unemotional conversations with people that are almost living on another planet. And I just keep hearing about it today. I just was late here because of an electrician, and I said, well, I got to run to this seniors and class. Hopefully I can solve the problem. And he said, less people. I said, well, that helps, but, you know, I played golf with somebody, and it was a similar thing. I'm always looking for segues, and it was like, well, same thing, less people. I said, well, that's a separate problem, but we're still, don't you think that the number of, you know, and it's just like, I get really worked up about this, and it's like, someone once said, come up with a really good question that kind of puts people off balance from their stance. I'm rambling now, like maybe we can come up with a good question. This is where I struggle. Sorry, it's not a question.
No, I'm totally getting where you're coming from though, because this communication is a big problem right now. And I've shifted actually, it's not reflected in today's talk, but in other audiences, I knew you were going to be friendly. In other audiences, I tend to talk less about climate change and more about drought, more about wildfire, more about the impact of increased temperatures as opposed to the reason for them. You can get back to the reason after a while, but people understand running out of water. People understand when they can't breathe. People understand when they're so uncomfortable because of the temperature that they don't want to walk. These are things that people are really getting now. So I would go through that door. The other person I would recommend, Catherine Hayhoe. She's a UBC Resource Environmental Management, I believe. Anyway, she's a prof there. And she's very good on the communication with people like those that you just described. I'm also finding that I can find a way to agree with a person like that. Like I could say, yes, you're right. The more people we have consuming at the rate that we consume, the bigger problems we're going to have, and including climate change, because consumption drives a lot of the emissions. All of us could reduce our consumption. I'm certain of that. And that absolutely reduces emissions. So yeah, population is a problem. Let's talk about that. What exactly are you proposing?
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'm coming back here.
Often people say they can't hear me. Greed is the problem on the planet. It's getting worse. In Vancouver today, you drive in and there's more single-family homes disappearing, more multi-family homes coming up. How are they being heated? Are they using the better technology? I can probably answer that quickly. No, they're using the old way because it's easier.
Well, we do have a new step code for Vancouver, which is to reduce the gas connections. So you may not be witnessing the change yet, but new construction will not be connected to gas lines. And that will mean they will be electrified for heating and cooling. That's a big step. Yeah, densification is also a good step for reducing the carbon emissions from an urban area. So it's slow, but you know, Nanaimo led the way for us, and you know, our city council stood their ground when the mayor was trying to backtrack on the gas connection ruling that they had had previously. So yeah, it's a bit of a fits and starts in terms of progress, but continued pressure on all of these points is the way to move the needle. And we don't know what the thresholds are out there. We don't know what the threshold is, for example, for this NDP. You know, it was pretty close when we got Bill 14 and 15. These were the speed up infrastructure bills for BC. It was one vote that could have flipped that. And we can pressure our politicians to pay attention to all of the information and start talking about the true cost of the decisions they are making. Because right now, we have a very distorted view of, oh, the US is coming, the US is coming. We need to build more fossil energy. That is crazy. It's an excuse. It's like Trump is in a Trojan horse and has come into Canada. We need to hold them to account. And taking action and joining groups and becoming knowledgeable yourselves about these little intricacies like the housing is very important, because actually politicians do listen. It's just that it takes a pretty big megaphone to get them to listen.
I think politicians only listen when it affects their job.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that is the way it works. And that's what I'm saying, that as citizens, we can make them afraid they're going to lose their jobs. A couple down here.
Yeah, one here and then come back. Thank you for your talk. And I'm wondering if you can give us some idea of how many new EVs are in the Metro Vancouver, how many people have solar panels, you know, what proportion of change have individuals made?
Yeah.
Because it seems like a lot of us know and are doing the things we should be doing, and yet things are getting worse.
Yeah, we say things are getting worse, and that you know, the big gross measurement of emissions, that's true. Emissions are going up. I mean, to be fair, Canadian emissions appear to have plateaued. It's just that the growth in oil and gas emissions means that all of the savings that all the other sectors are doing is for naught, because oil and gas continues to increase. So these, I don't know the numbers of the, you know, I don't have a graph of solar energy expansion in Vancouver or the number of EVs, but I do know that they are continuing to climb. And you know, you hear a lot, particularly in the EV arena, of, oh, yeah, that now, you know, Tesla's stocks are dropping, blah, blah.
That's garbage.
Or it is garbage. And you have to like dig into it, and what they're saying actually is that the rate of increase is a little bit less. So that they're then misinterpreting to be saying it's going down. So it, you know, we are making progress in many of these areas. I can't give you the exact numbers, but please keep at it.
Yeah, I find a lot of the things we do are very good, and it's very serious. There's the Gaia theory that even if we cut our emissions, the North will just, bogs will release more. But what I heard the other day, I saw the other day on Netflix, it was about how 2025 in the States did an exact act of how you change or make a revolution.
Project 2025?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how the Democrats were saying, well, we're going to use this funding that has disappeared. And the nice way to do it is this way. And what I find is the right wing goes to the throat to win, and that's all that cares. But he had some theories on how you would reverse the politics of that. But it was very hard-nosed. It wasn't like you were being nice and dancing with kids and stuff like that. You had to, when you took over power, you had to work on the edge of the law to change it on your direction right away. Unfortunately, I lost that page on Netflix. It was one of those things 3 levels down, and where did it go? But I'm doing my bit for it. But it's a minuscule, like you say, all of the people are reducing, but as long as the fossil fuels go up, it's a waste of energy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit like the hummingbird. So I'll just briefly tell the hummingbird story because I know many of you do know it, but it's a beautiful story, and it's very hopeful. And so it's from indigenous knowledge. There's a wildfire, and it's burning out of control, and all the animals are running out of the forest and are frightened. The hummingbird is flying into the flames. And the animals are going, what? You're crazy. Why are you doing that? And then they watch as she goes into the flames, drops a drop of water, comes out to the pond, gets another drop of water, does this over and over. And, okay, you can argue it's pointless. That's what the animals said. Why are you doing that? This is pointless. You're not going to put out the fire. And the hummingbird's response is, but I'm doing what I can. And we don't know what the threshold is for all the hummingbirds in the world coming to drop a drop of water on the fire. Where's the threshold where it actually works? We don't know where that is. But we do know silence is not an option. And every little bit of action moves the needle ever so slightly. So there's plenty of reason to be despondent about the rate of progress on climate change. And we have these incredibly destructive forces at work. Profit is driving a lot of that. Greed, as was mentioned. But, I tell my Canadian friends, like, remember, the Americans also elected Obama twice. We did have an incredible fossil energy reduction plan in the Biden administration. And Canada could become a leader in renewable energy. We don't have to cede the market to China. We can grow our own. So change is possible, and we're going to push till it happens.
Oh, there. This is live, can you hear me? I belong to an organization called the Vancouver Electric Vehicle Association. We're the secret of Vancouver. Most of you don't know we even exist. We've been around since 1988, and we've been promoting the adoption of electric vehicles. You don't have to buy a new electric vehicle. I did that. A lot of other people see that there's used electric vehicles available. The secret of the car dealers is they don't want you to buy an electric vehicle because 75% of their profit comes from the gasoline-powered car that you take in every 6 months and get an oil change and you get a lot of repairs. You buy an electric vehicle, you don't have those problems. If you don't want to buy a vehicle, get a bicycle. Get an electric bicycle or walk. But there's all kinds of things that you can personally do, and as he says, you can be that little bird that brings the drop of water. So, when you go to look at changing your vehicle, go for a test drive on an electric vehicle. Yes, Tesla sales are dropping because the other manufacturers have stepped up. They're producing quality cars. So you can buy a good quality electric vehicle, brand new, or you can save a lot of money because you're all smart people. You've all been around for a while. You all know that if you buy a used electric vehicle, someone else pays the depreciation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I was very happy to see you over there. I do know the organization. You did a wonderful action on Burnaby Mountain. We circled the tank facility there in electric vehicles. Absolutely true. Electric vehicles make a huge dent in both air pollution and, of course, carbon emissions. And the disinformation is stunning. And sometimes a little hard to understand, but my adage there is follow the money. Because if you follow the money, you'll end up where the gentleman said, which is that they are selling or trying to undercut the EVs because they make more money on gas vehicles. Yeah, especially if you include the cost of buying gas, your vehicle will pay for itself the difference in the costs will be eliminated in a few years. And the service is, there's virtually no service on the electric vehicles. I have a Tesla Model 3, best car I ever had. I took the Tesla emblem off and put an Audi emblem on it.
Okay, we have time for one more question. I have a question here, and then because of the time we have the room, we have to wrap up.
This is less a question than a comment. One of the serious issues about greenwashing is the press that we are exposed to. And as a veteran of the TMX,
this is one of the Burnett River Six. She is the famous Stephanie.
It is very, very difficult to get the mainstream press to pay any attention to any event that we choose to involve ourselves in. But it's important to kind of distinguish, to know what press you're looking at. For example, if you're going to get all your news from a post-media environment, you're not going to hear much about environmental progress. But it's really worth everybody's while to support the press which does encourage everybody. So, for example, the National Observer has an environmental portion to it. I was quite astonished to go into my broker's office, where I never expected to see anything environmental, and to discover that the Globe and Mail actually puts out a piece monthly called, now I've forgotten, Nights?
Corporate Nights.
Corporate Nights, which has lots of good information in it. Support organizations like TIE locally, the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, the National Observer, and then there are lots of encouraging things online. My particular favorite, because it gives a lot of international news, which we're very short on here, is called Outrage and Optimism. And that will introduce you to Cristiana Figueres, who is an amazing woman, who was the director of the 2015 Paris, help me out here. COP, yes. So it's really worth everybody's time and energy to support these organizations that do give us good news, because otherwise we're exposed to a ton of greenwashing.
It's a really important point. As you're, education is an action, and making yourself aware of the dynamics in the press. Globe and Mail does have the corporate nights, but it is also Canada's business newspaper, and it is absolutely influenced heavily by the oil and gas industry. And it's very difficult to get any criticism of the industry into that paper, which is our national paper. That said, these other outlets, the Tyee was mentioned, the Narwhal, are just two of the best ones locally. And these do make a difference in how people understand the complexity of climate change. The problem is complex in a certain way, in terms of it interacts with society in a complex way, but the fundamentals are quite simple. You build new fossil energy infrastructure, you increase emissions. You increase emissions, you increase temperatures. You increase temperatures, you get more weather disasters, people dying, and more destruction. Simple. So I hope you'll go away today, check out the tables, consider one of these events, and plug into your people. That's how we're going to get through this. Thank you very much.